The helicopter's rotors cut through the humid air as it touched down on the forward operating base. Dust swirled around the landing zone, and through the haze stepped Kathleen Morrison, her medical kit secured tightly across her shoulder. To everyone watching, she was just another support medic being rotated into their sector. They had no idea they were looking at someone who had earned the right to wear one of the most exclusive pins in the military. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun barely crested the mountains when Kathleen reported to the medical tent at Forward Operating Base Viper. Afghanistan's unforgiving landscape stretched endlessly beyond the perimeter walls, a reminder of how isolated their position really was. She'd been assigned here as a combat medic to support ongoing operations, but the reception was exactly what she'd expected. "Great, another desk medic," muttered Sergeant Rodriguez as he walked past with his squad. "Hope she can handle more than paperwork when things get real." Kathleen didn't respond. She'd heard variations of this comment at every assignment for the past 3 years. The assumption was always the same: female medic equals rear echelon support. She focused on organizing her medical supplies, each item placed with methodical precision that spoke to extensive field experience. The base housed elements from multiple units. The 75th Ranger Regiment maintained the security perimeter, while various special operations teams used Viper as a staging area for missions deeper into Taliban territory. Among them was SEAL Team 7, led by Lieutenant Commander Jake Harrison, a veteran with 12 deployments under his belt. Harrison had built his reputation on attention to detail and reading people quickly. In his world, the difference between life and death often came down to knowing exactly who you could count on when everything went sideways. As he walked past the medical tent that first day, something caught his eye about the new medic's equipment setup. Her gear was arranged with the kind of systematic efficiency that came from muscle memory, not training manuals. The first real test came on day 3. Alpha Squad from the Rangers had been conducting a routine patrol when they hit an IED 2 clicks north of the base. The radio crackled with urgent calls for immediate medical evacuation. Kathleen grabbed her medical bag and sprinted toward the helicopter landing zone before anyone else had processed the full situation. "Morrison, wait for the flight medic," called Major Phillips, the base medical officer. "I am the flight medic," Kathleen replied without slowing down, her voice carrying an edge of authority that made Phillips pause. The helicopter lifted off with Kathleen aboard, racing toward the casualty site. Through her headset, she could hear the pilot's tense communication with the ground team. 2 soldiers were down, one with severe trauma to his lower extremities, another with suspected internal injuries from the blast. When they touched down in the hot landing zone, Kathleen moved with a speed and confidence that immediately caught the attention of the Rangers providing security. She assessed both casualties in seconds, prioritizing treatment with the kind of rapid decision-making that only came from extensive combat experience. "I need you to maintain pressure here while I establish an airway," she directed Corporal Davis, her hands already working to stabilize the more critical patient. "Keep talking to him. I need him to be conscious." As she worked, small arms fire erupted from a tree line 300 meters away. The Rangers returned fire while Kathleen continued her medical intervention, completely focused on her patients despite bullets snapping overhead. "We need to go now," shouted the helicopter pilot through the radio. 30 more seconds, Kathleen responded calmly, finishing a procedure that would determine whether her patient lived or died. She had both casualties stabilized and ready for transport exactly when she said she would. During the flight back to base, she continued working on both patients, her hands steady despite the helicopter's violent maneuvers to avoid potential ground fire. By the time they reached the base hospital, both soldiers were stable and conscious. Word of her performance spread quickly through the base. The Rangers who had been on that mission told everyone who would listen about the new medic who had worked under fire like she'd been doing it for years. But the skepticism remained, especially among some of the more traditional soldiers who struggled to accept that a female medic could handle frontline combat medicine. The real turning point came during a joint training exercise 2 weeks later. SEAL Team 7 was running combat scenarios with the Ranger platoons, practicing coordinated assaults on simulated enemy positions. The exercise involved night operations, close quarters combat, and medical evacuation procedures under fire. Kathleen had volunteered to support the exercise as the primary medical asset. Most assumed this meant she would remain at the base camp, ready to treat any training injuries. Instead, she requested to embed directly with the assault teams. "Negative," replied Captain Martinez, the exercise commander. "Medical personnel maintain a safe distance during live-fire exercises." "I'm qualified for forward deployment," Kathleen stated simply. "All medics are qualified for forward deployment in theory," Martinez responded dismissively. "This is different. These teams move fast and hard. No offense, but keeping up isn't just about medical skills." Lieutenant Commander Harrison had been listening to this exchange with growing interest. Something about Morrison's quiet confidence reminded him of other special operations personnel he'd worked with. There was an underlying assurance in her demeanor that suggested capabilities beyond standard medical training. "What's your background, Morrison?" he asked directly. "Combat medic, sir. Multiple deployments." "That's not what I'm asking." Kathleen met his gaze steadily. "I'm qualified to support special operations missions, sir." Harrison studied her for a long moment. In his experience, people with legitimate special operations backgrounds didn't oversell themselves. They stated facts and let their performance speak for itself. Morrison's responses had that characteristic understatement he recognized immediately. "She embeds with my team," Harrison decided. "If she can't keep up, we'll know within the first hour." The exercise began at 0200 hours with a 5-kilometer approach march through mountainous terrain. The SEAL team moved at a punishing pace, using night vision equipment to navigate treacherous paths in complete darkness. Harrison expected the medic to fall behind within the first kilometer. Instead, Kathleen matched their pace effortlessly, her movements silent and sure despite carrying a full medical load in addition to standard combat equipment. She positioned herself properly within the patrol formation without instruction, maintaining appropriate spacing and fields of fire automatically. When they reached the objective area, a simulated enemy compound, Harrison's team prepared for their assault. The plan called for rapid entry, clearing multiple buildings simultaneously while Harrison's squad provided overwatch from an elevated position. "Morrison, you establish a casualty collection point here," Harrison directed, indicating a position behind their assault line. "Roger that, sir," she replied, but instead of moving to the rear, she advanced with the lead element, positioning herself where she could reach casualties quickly while maintaining protective cover. Harrison was about to redirect her when the exercise began. Blank ammunition filled the air as both sides engaged. Within minutes, 2 Rangers had simulated wounds that required immediate medical attention. Before Harrison could call for the medic, Kathleen was already moving between positions, treating casualties under simulated fire while the assault continued around her. What impressed him most wasn't just her medical skills, but her tactical awareness. She moved between cover points like someone with extensive combat experience, never exposing herself unnecessarily, but always positioning for maximum effectiveness. When one of his SEALs took a simulated hit in an exposed position, she coordinated with the assault team to provide covering fire while she reached him. The exercise continued for 6 hours, involving multiple scenarios and simulated casualties. Throughout it all, Kathleen performed flawlessly, demonstrating not just medical competence, but tactical proficiency that exceeded what any standard combat medic should possess. As dawn broke and the exercise concluded, Harrison found himself studying Morrison more carefully. Her equipment, her movement, her tactical decision-making, everything suggested training far beyond standard military medical protocols. But it was something else that finally caught his attention as she knelt to repack her medical supplies. There, barely visible above her left boot, was a small metal pin that made Harrison's eyes narrow with sudden recognition. The combat diver pin gleamed dully in the early morning light, its distinctive design unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. Harrison had seen that pin on exactly 14 people in his entire military career, and every single one of them had been a member of the most elite underwater operations units in the world. He waited until Morrison had finished securing her gear before approaching. The other team members were already heading back to base camp, exhausted from the night-long exercise, but Harrison needed answers. "Morrison," he called quietly. She looked up, her expression neutral but alert. "Yes, sir?" "That's an interesting pin you're wearing." Kathleen's eyes flicked down to her boot, then back to Harrison's face. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "It's just a qualification badge, sir," she said finally. Harrison almost smiled at that response. It was exactly what he would have expected from someone with legitimate credentials. No bragging, no elaborate explanations, just understated acknowledgement. "Just a qualification badge," he repeated. "You know, I've been in special operations for 16 years. I can count on two hands the number of people I've met who wear that particular badge." Kathleen remained silent, but Harrison caught the slight shift in her posture. She was assessing him now, trying to determine how much to reveal. "The Navy Combat Diver qualification isn't something they hand out at medical school," Harrison continued. "Last I checked, earning that pin required completing one of the most demanding underwater operations courses in the military. Courses that have a 92% attrition rate." 94%, actually, Kathleen corrected automatically, then caught herself. Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. 94, you're right. He paused, studying her face. So the question becomes, how does a combat medic end up with specialized diving qualifications that most Navy SEALs struggle to earn? The morning air was crisp at this altitude, and Harrison could see his breath as he waited for her response. Around them, the mountains of Afghanistan stretched endlessly, a harsh reminder of how far they were from any ocean where combat diving skills would be relevant. "It's complicated, sir," Kathleen said. "I've got time." She looked around, ensuring they were alone, then seemed to make a decision. "I wasn't always a medic." "What were you?" "Navy Special Warfare." Harrison felt pieces clicking into place. The tactical awareness, the calm under fire, the way she moved through the exercise, it all made sense now. "Which unit?" "WSCC," she said quietly. "Special Warfare Combatant Craft Crewman." Harrison's respect for Morrison increased immediately. WSC operators were the Navy's elite boat crews, responsible for inserting and extracting special operations teams in the most hostile maritime environments imaginable. They operated high-speed patrol boats in conditions that would terrify most sailors, often under heavy enemy fire. How long? 8 years active duty. 2 deployments to Iraq, 3 to Afghanistan, 1 classified location I can't discuss. "And you left to become a medic?" Kathleen's expression darkened slightly. It wasn't exactly voluntary. Harrison understood immediately. He'd seen too many exceptional operators forced out of their units due to politics, injuries, or circumstances beyond their control. The military's loss was often another unit's gain, but the transition was rarely easy. What happened? IED strike during a riverine operation in Iraq. My boat took a direct hit. I pulled 3 teammates out of burning wreckage, but took shrapnel in my back and shoulder. The medical review board said I was no longer fit for special operations duty. But you stayed in. Couldn't imagine doing anything else. Retrained as a combat medic. Figured if I couldn't operate with special ops teams anymore, at least I could keep them alive when things went wrong. Harrison nodded slowly. It explained everything. Her tactical proficiency, her calmness under fire, her ability to keep pace with his team during the exercise. Morrison wasn't just a medic who happened to be tough. She was a special operations veteran who had been forced to find a new way to serve. Does anyone else know? Major Phillips knows I have prior special operations experience, but not the details. Most people see female doctors and make assumptions. And you let them? Easier that way. Less questions, less complications. Harrison understood that perspective. Sometimes it's better to let people underestimate you, especially when you're trying to rebuild a career after losing everything you trained for. Why didn't you apply for a medical special operations unit? 160th SOAR is always looking for experienced medics with special ops backgrounds. Kathleen's jaw tightened slightly. I tried. The medical review board flagged my record. Any unit that wants me has to get special approval, and most commanders don't want the paperwork hassle. The injustice of that wasn't lost on Harrison. The military was full of bureaucratic obstacles that prevented good people from serving where they could be most effective. He'd seen too many talented operators sidelined by administrative decisions that had nothing to do with their actual capabilities. So you ended up here. Standard assignment, forward medical support for conventional forces. Not exactly what I trained for, but it's still serving. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, processing what he'd learned. Morrison represented exactly the kind of asset that special operations units desperately needed, someone with both combat experience and advanced medical training. The fact that she was being wasted on routine medical support was a travesty. "You know," he said finally, "my team might be able to use someone with your background." Kathleen looked at him sharply. "Sir?" "We're planning a mission that could use specialized medical support, someone who understands special operations procedures and can operate in high-threat environments." "What kind of mission?" Harrison glanced around, ensuring they were still alone. "Classified, but I can tell you it involves riverine operations. Someone with your background might be particularly valuable." The interest in Morrison's eyes was immediate and intense. After years of routine medical support, the prospect of returning to special operations work, even in a support capacity, clearly appealed to her. "I'd need command approval to attach to your unit, even temporarily." "Leave that to me. What I need to know is whether you're interested and whether you're ready." "I've been ready for 3 years, sir." Harrison smiled at the conviction in her voice. "Good, but understand, if you embed with my team, there won't be any allowances made for the fact that you're officially designated as medical support. You'll be expected to operate at the same level as any other team member. I wouldn't want it any other way." "And Morrison?" "Yes, sir. When we're operational, you can lose the just a medic routine. My team needs to know exactly who they're working with." That afternoon, Harrison requested a meeting with Colonel Davidson, the base commander. Davidson was a career infantry officer who had worked with special operations units throughout his career and understood their unique requirements. "You want to attach a medic to your team for your next operation?" Davidson asked, reviewing Harrison's request. "Not just any medic. Morrison has specialized qualifications that make her particularly suited for this mission." "Such as?" "Prior special warfare experience, SWIC qualified with combat diving credentials." Davidson's eyebrows rose. "Morrison? The medic who just arrived from the Medical Support Command?" "The same one." "Her file doesn't mention special warfare background." "It wouldn't. She was medically reclassified after combat injuries, but her qualifications are still valid." Davidson leaned back in his chair, considering. "You're telling me we have a former special warfare operator working routine medical support?" "Apparently so." "And you want her for this riverine interdiction mission?" Harrison nodded. The mission was scheduled for the following week, a high-risk operation to intercept a Taliban weapons shipment moving down the Kunar River. It would involve fast boats, night operations, and the kind of maritime tactics that were Morrison's specialty. "Sir, with respect, this mission profile is exactly what she trained for during 8 years in SWIC. Having someone with her background could be the difference between success and disaster." Davidson was quiet for several minutes, reviewing Morrison's official file on his computer. Finally, he looked up. "Her medical evaluations are outstanding. Combat performance ratings are exceptional. But there's a flag in her record about special operations fitness. Based on injuries sustained in combat while saving her teammates' lives." "Point taken." Davidson closed the file. "You're sure about this, Commander?" "I watched her operate during yesterday's exercise. She's not just qualified, she's exactly what we need." "All right, I'll approve the temporary attachment. But Harrison?" "Sir?" "If this goes sideways, it's your responsibility." "Understood." That evening, Harrison found Morrison in the medical tent, updating patient records from the day's training casualties. "Pack your gear," he said without preamble. She looked up from her paperwork. "Sir, you're officially attached to SEAL Team 7 as of tomorrow. Mission briefing is at 600. The transformation in Morrison's expression was immediate. Years of frustration and underutilization seemed to fall away, replaced by the focused intensity Harrison had glimpsed during the exercise. "What's the mission profile?" "Riverine interdiction, fast boats, night operations, hostile environment. Ring any bells?" For the first time since he'd met her, Kathleen Morrison smiled genuinely. "Like riding a bicycle, sir." "Good, but we're going to find out just how much you remember." As Harrison left the medical tent, he reflected on how quickly things could change in their line of work. 24 hours ago, Morrison had been just another support medic assigned to his base. Now she was about to become a crucial element in one of the most dangerous missions his team had attempted in months. He hoped his instincts about her capabilities were correct, because in 3 days, they would be racing down an enemy-controlled river in the middle of the night, and there would be no room for doubt or second-guessing. Morrison would either prove herself as the special operations veteran she claimed to be, or she would become a liability that could get his entire team killed. Either way, they were about to find out what she was really made of. The mission briefing room buzzed with controlled tension as SEAL Team 7 assembled at 0600 sharp. Kathleen entered to find 8 pairs of eyes studying her with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. These men had worked together for months, developing the kind of seamless coordination that kept special operations teams alive in hostile territory. She was the unknown variable. "Gentlemen," Harrison began, "Morrison will be our medical asset for Operation River Strike. She'll be embedded with Alpha Squad for the duration." Petty Officer First Class Marcus Webb, the team's senior enlisted man, spoke up. "Sir, with respect, we've trained for this mission with standard medical support positioned at the extraction point. Embedding medical personnel in the assault element changes our tactical profile." "It does," Harrison agreed. "Morrison, why don't you brief the team on your qualifications?" Kathleen stood, meeting each man's gaze steadily. 8 years Navy Special Warfare combatant craft crewman, 6 operational deployments, qualified on Mark V Special Operations Craft, CRRC, and SOC-R platforms, combat diver certified, advanced maritime operations specialist. The room went completely silent. Webb's expression shifted from skepticism to surprise, then to grudging respect. "You're SWAC?" asked Petty Officer Second Class Tony Reyes, the team's communications specialist. "Was SWAC, medically reclassified after combat injuries." Chief Petty Officer Dan Torres, Harrison's second-in-command, leaned forward. "Which boat teams?" "SBT-12 out of Norfolk, then SBT-20 in Little Creek." Torres nodded slowly. "I worked with SBT-20 during the Anbar operations. Those guys were solid." The atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly. The SEALs might not know Morrison personally, but they knew the reputation of special boat teams. The mutual respect between SWAC operators and SEALs ran deep, forged through countless joint operations where each relied on the other for survival. "The mission profile," Harrison continued, activating the wall display. A satellite image of the Kunar River appeared, showing a winding waterway through mountainous terrain. "Intelligence indicates a high-value weapons shipment moving downriver tomorrow night. Our job is to intercept, document the cargo, and eliminate the transport capability." Red markers appeared on the map, indicating enemy positions along the riverbank. Kathleen studied the tactical situation with professional interest. The geography was challenging: narrow river channels with limited maneuvering room, high banks providing excellent sniper positions, and multiple escape routes for enemy forces. "We'll be using 2 SOCR boats," Harrison explained. "Alpha boat carries the primary assault team. Bravo boat provides overwatch and extraction security. Insertion point is here." He indicated a position 5 kilometers upstream from the target area. The enemy convoy consists of 3 modified fishing boats carrying an estimated 20 fighters and undetermined weapons cargo. Petty Officer Jake Sullivan, the team's newest member, raised his hand. "Rules of engagement: Full spectrum. This is a direct action mission with kill or capture authority on all enemy personnel. Kathleen absorbed the tactical details while simultaneously evaluating the medical challenges. Riverine operations presented unique trauma scenarios: blast injuries from RPGs, drowning risks, hypothermia from river water, and limited evacuation options in hostile territory. Medical considerations, she said, speaking for the first time since introducing herself. River water temperature is approximately 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Immersion time becomes critical after 15 minutes. We'll need thermal protection for any water casualties, and I'll pre-position hypothermia treatment supplies on both boats. Harrison nodded approvingly. What else? Blast trauma from RPGs or IEDs is the primary threat profile. I'll configure my medical load for massive hemorrhage control and airway management, but we need to discuss casualty evacuation procedures. Standard medevac helicopters can't operate effectively in this terrain at night. Already arranged, Torres interjected. 160th has an MH6 Littlebird on standby at Firebase Echo, 12 minutes flight time to our AO. The briefing continued for another hour, covering every aspect of the operation, from weather conditions to enemy capabilities. Kathleen found herself contributing tactical insights based on her SWAC experience, suggestions that clearly impressed the SEAL team members. After the briefing, Webb approached her as the others filed out. "Morrison, I owe you an apology. When I heard we were getting a medic attached, I expected someone who would slow you down and need protection." Webb grimaced. "Yeah, something like that. No offense taken. I've been dealing with those assumptions for 3 years. For what it's worth, anyone who made it through SWEC training has my respect. That program breaks a lot of good people." The rest of the day was spent in intensive preparation. Kathleen inspected and tested every piece of medical equipment, configuring her loadout for the specific challenges of riverine combat. She packed hypothermia kits, underwater first aid supplies, and specialized trauma gear designed for use in small boats. More importantly, she began the mental process of shifting back into special operations mode. For 3 years, she had been operating at the pace and intensity of conventional medical support. This mission would require her to function at the split-second decision-making level that had defined her SWEC career. That evening, she found herself at the base's makeshift gym, working through combat conditioning routines she hadn't used since leaving Special Boat Team 20. Muscle memory was returning, her body remembering the physical demands of high-intensity operations. "Preparing for tomorrow?" Harrison's voice came from the gym entrance. "Old habits," Kathleen replied, continuing her workout. SWEC conditioning is different from standard military fitness, more emphasis on functional strength and water confidence. Harrison stepped inside, observing her training routine. "Are you nervous about getting back in the game?" "Honestly, yes and no." Kathleen paused her workout, wiping sweat from her forehead. "The tactical side feels natural, like it never left, but I haven't operated with a team in 3 years. Team dynamics, communication patterns, trust levels, those things take time to develop. My guys seem to be warming up to you pretty quickly. SWAC and SEAL communities have history together. That helps." Harrison nodded. "What concerns you most about tomorrow?" Kathleen considered the question carefully. "Your team has trained together extensively. They know each other's capabilities, limitations, and instincts. I'm the unknown factor. In a high-stress environment, unknown factors can get people killed." "Fair point. What do you suggest?" "Give me a specific role with clearly defined responsibilities. Don't try to integrate me into established team patterns. Use me as an asset, but don't expect seamless coordination on the first operation." Harrison appreciated her honesty. Many operators would have claimed they could integrate immediately, but Morrison was being realistic about the challenges. "Your primary responsibility is medical, obviously, but I also want you available for boat handling if needed. Your SWAC experience could be invaluable if something happens to our primary coxswains." "Understood." The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp mountain air that made every sound carry farther than usual. The team assembled before dawn, loading their equipment onto helicopters that would transport them to the mission staging area near the river. During the flight, Kathleen reviewed her medical protocols one final time. She'd memorized the medical history and blood type of every team member, identified the most likely casualty scenarios, and rehearsed treatment procedures for operating in a moving boat under combat conditions. The helicopters touched down at Firebase Echo just as the sun began setting behind the mountains. Two SOCR boats waited at a small dock extending into the Kunar River, their sleek black hulls designed for speed and stealth in riverine environments. Kathleen ran her hands along the hull of the nearest boat, familiarizing herself with its configuration. The Special Operations Craft Riverine was a technological marvel, heavily armed, highly maneuverable, and capable of operating in water as shallow as 18 inches. "Brings back memories," Torres asked, joining her at the dock. "Like yesterday, these boats are beautiful machines when they're in the right hands. Let's hope we remember how to drive them." As darkness fell, the team conducted final equipment checks. Kathleen verified her medical supplies were properly secured and accessible, tested her night vision equipment, and confirmed radio communications with boat crews. At 2200 hours, the boats slipped away from the dock, their specially muffled engines producing only a whisper of sound. Harrison commanded Alpha Boat with Torres, Webb, Reyes, and Kathleen. Bravo Boat carried Sullivan and 3 other team members under the command of Petty Officer First Class Kevin Blake. The river was black as oil, reflecting nothing of the star-filled sky above. Kathleen positioned herself where she could monitor both the tactical situation and her team members' condition. The night air was cold enough to see breath, and she knew hypothermia would become a factor if anyone ended up in the water. They moved downstream at 15 knots, using night vision and GPS navigation to avoid obstacles in the dark water. The riverbank was lined with rocky outcroppings and dense vegetation that could conceal enemy positions. After 40 minutes of movement, Harrison's voice came through their communication system. "Target area in sight. Alpha Boat moving to intercept position." Through her night vision goggles, Kathleen could see 3 boats moving downstream approximately 800 meters ahead. The enemy vessels were larger than expected, modified fishing boats with elevated fighting positions and what appeared to be heavy weapons mounted on their decks. "Bravo Boat in overwatch position," Blake reported from the second SOCR. Harrison maneuvered their boat to intercept the enemy formation. The plan called for a coordinated assault that would disable the enemy vessels while preserving their cargo for intelligence exploitation. "All stations, stand by," Harrison commanded. "Weapons free in 30 seconds." Kathleen checked her medical equipment one final time and prepared for what she knew would be a violent and chaotic engagement. After 3 years of routine medical support, she was about to find out whether she still had what it took to operate in the most dangerous environment the military had to offer. The enemy boats were closing rapidly, their crews apparently unaware of the American presence. In moments, the night would explode into combat, and everything she'd trained for over the past 8 years would be put to the ultimate test. The first burst of gunfire shattered the night silence at exactly 23:47 hours. Harrison's boat had closed to within 200 meters of the enemy formation when a Taliban fighter spotted their approach and opened fire with an AK-47, muzzle flashes strobing across the dark water. "Contact front," Webb shouted, bringing his M4 carbine to bear on the nearest enemy vessel. The engagement erupted instantly into controlled chaos. Both SOCR boats accelerated into attack formation while the SEAL team members laid down precise suppressive fire. The enemy boats responded with a hail of automatic weapons fire and RPG launches that sent geysers of water exploding around the American craft. Kathleen braced herself against the boat's gunwale as Harrison threw the SOCR into a high-speed evasive maneuver. The vessel's twin engines screaming as they pushed the craft through a series of violent turns. Her medical equipment rattled in its secured containers, but her focus remained locked on the tactical situation developing around them. "RPG inbound," Torres yelled, pointing toward a streak of light arcing across the water from the middle enemy boat. The rocket-propelled grenade passed directly over their vessel, missing by less than 10 feet before detonating against the rocky riverbank behind them. Harrison continued his evasive maneuvers. Bravo boat had positioned itself on the opposite flank of the enemy formation, creating a crossfire that divided the Taliban fighters' attention. Blake's team was systematically engaging the rear enemy vessel, their coordinated fire beginning to reduce its combat effectiveness. "Alpha boat, we have casualties on target too," Blake reported through the radio. "Multiple enemy personnel down, but they're still fighting." The middle enemy boat suddenly veered toward shore, apparently attempting to beach itself and allow its fighters to escape on foot. Harrison recognized the tactical problem immediately. If the enemy reached the riverbank, the weapons cargo would disappear into the mountainous terrain where helicopters and boats couldn't follow. "Negative on the beach landing," Harrison announced. "Torres, put some rounds into their engine compartment." The chief petty officer shifted his fire to the enemy boat's stern, his precision shooting targeting the engine bay with devastating effect. Within seconds, black smoke began pouring from the vessel as its engine seized. But the tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. The lead enemy boat had turned back toward the American formation, its crew apparently deciding to ram Alpha boat rather than attempt escape. The vessel was equipped with a heavy machine gun mounted on its bow, and the gunner was walking rounds towards Harrison's position. "Incoming ramming attempt," Webb warned. "Heavy weapons fire, port side." Harrison spun the wheel hard to starboard, but the enemy vessel's trajectory would bring it into collision course within 30 seconds. The Taliban boat was larger and heavier than the SOCR. A collision would likely disable the American craft and potentially kill everyone aboard. "I can stop them," Kathleen said suddenly, her voice cutting through the tactical radio chatter. "Negative, Morrison. Stay in position," Harrison replied, focused on his evasive maneuvers. "Sir, I can disable that boat, but I need to get closer." Torres looked at her with alarm. "Morrison, your medical support. Stay down and let us handle the tactical situation." Kathleen's response carried the authority of her 8 years in special warfare. "Chief, I'm not just medical support. I'm SWIC qualified on boat-to-boat assault tactics. That ramming attempt is going to succeed unless we neutralize their steering immediately." Harrison glanced at her, recognizing the professional confidence in her voice. "In combat, you used every available asset to survive." Morrison's SWCC background made her qualified for exactly this type of engagement. "What do you need?" he asked. "Close to 50 meters, parallel course. I can disable their steering with precision fire to their rudder assembly." "That puts us in optimal range for their heavy weapons." "Yes, sir, but it's our best tactical option." Harrison made the decision that would define the next 60 seconds of their lives. "Do it." Torres, Webb, suppress their heavy weapons position. "Morrison, you have one shot at this." The SOCR surged forward, Harrison pushing the engines to maximum power as he angled toward the enemy vessel. The Taliban boat continued its ramming approach, its heavy machine gun now firing continuously at their position. Rounds snapped overhead and punched into the water around them as Torres and Webb returned fire, their disciplined shooting forcing the enemy gunner to duck behind his weapon's shield. But the incoming fire was so intense that staying exposed for more than a few seconds would be suicidal. At 60 meters range, Kathleen moved to the boat's stern, her M4 carbine equipped with an ACOG scope that would allow precise shooting in the darkness. The enemy vessel's rudder assembly was barely visible in the churning water behind its hull, a target that required exceptional marksmanship under ideal conditions. These conditions were anything but ideal. 50 meters, Harrison called. Kathleen steadied herself against the boat's movement, controlling her breathing as she acquired her target through the scope. The enemy vessel was pitching and rolling in the river current, while their own boat was vibrating from engine stress and evasive maneuvers. She had one magazine, 30 rounds, to disable a moving target from a moving platform. Miss, and Harrison's boat would be rammed and potentially sunk within the next 20 seconds. The first burst of 3 rounds missed, the bullet striking the water just short of the enemy rudder. Kathleen adjusted her aim point, compensating for the complex ballistics of the engagement. Her second burst struck the enemy boat's transom, close enough to the rudder to cause damage, but not sufficient to disable steering. The Taliban vessel continued its ramming approach, now less than 40 meters away and closing rapidly. "Morrison," Torres shouted, "whatever you're going to do it now." The third burst found its target. 2 rounds struck the enemy boat's rudder assembly directly, severing the mechanical linkage between the steering wheel and the rudder itself. The Taliban vessel immediately began veering to port, its helmsman no longer able to control its direction. "Target disabled," Kathleen reported. "They've lost steering control." The enemy boat passed harmlessly to port, its crew now focused on trying to regain control of their vessel rather than conducting their ramming attack. But the engagement was far from over. "Alpha boat, be advised. Enemy Vessel 3 is attempting to beach on the east bank, multiple personnel disembarking with heavy weapons." Harrison swung their boat toward the shore, where Taliban fighters were indeed abandoning their disabled vessel and attempting to escape with what appeared to be several heavy weapons crates. The intelligence value of those weapons made their capture a mission priority. "Webb, Reyes, prepare for beach assault. Morrison, you're staying with the boat." "Negative, sir," Kathleen replied firmly. "Those fighters will establish defensive positions in the rocks. You'll need medical support forward if anyone gets hit during the assault." Torres started to object, but Harrison cut him off. "She's right. Morrison, you embed with the assault team, but your primary job is keeping people alive, not engaging the enemy." "Understood." The SOCR's bow scraped against the rocky shore as Harrison beached the vessel. Webb and Reyes were already over the side, moving rapidly toward the enemy positions visible among the boulders 50 meters inland. Kathleen followed, her medical bag secured across her back and her weapon ready. The Taliban fighters had indeed established a defensive line among the rocks, using the terrain's natural cover to create interlocking fields of fire. As the SEALs advanced, automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions simultaneously. "Contact left," Webb called, dropping behind a boulder as bullets chipped stone fragments around his position. Reyes moved to flank the enemy position, but immediately came under fire from a previously undetected fighter positioned in an elevated hide. The Taliban gunman had excellent fields of fire from his position and was systematically engaging each SEAL team member as they attempted to advance. "I can't get an angle on that elevated position," Reyes reported through his radio. "He's got us pinned down." Kathleen studied the tactical situation from her position behind a large rock outcropping. The enemy fighter's elevated position gave him tactical advantage, but it also isolated him from supporting fire from his teammates lower in the rocks. "I can reach him," she said into her radio. "Negative, Morrison," Harrison's voice replied from the boat. "Medical personnel do not engage in direct assault." "Sir, I'm SWCC qualified. This is within my operational parameters." Before anyone could respond, the elevated enemy position opened fire again, forcing Reyes to flatten himself against the ground as rounds snapped overhead. The Taliban fighter was systematically preventing any SEAL advance, and his position was nearly impregnable from their current angles of attack. Kathleen made a tactical decision that would either save her teammates' lives or get her killed. She identified a route through the rocks that would bring her within grenade range of the elevated position, but it required crossing 20 meters of open ground under potential enemy observation. "Covering fire on my movement," she announced, not asking for permission. Before Torres could object, she was moving. Her SWCC training had emphasized individual initiative and aggressive tactics, skills that translated directly to ground combat. She covered the open ground in a sprint that would have impressed her old instructors, reaching cover just as the enemy fighter swung his weapon toward her previous position. From her new angle, she had a clear throw to the elevated hide. The fragmentation grenade left her hand in a perfect arc, landing directly in the enemy position and detonating with devastating effect. "Target neutralized," she reported calmly. The explosion broke the Taliban defensive line's coordination, allowing Webb and Reyes to advance rapidly on the remaining fighters. Within 3 minutes, the engagement was over, 5 enemy personnel dead and several heavy weapons crates secured. As the team regrouped on the beach, Torres approached Kathleen with an expression that mixed admiration with concern. "Morrison, that was either the gutsiest thing I've seen in 15 years or the most reckless." "It was tactically sound," she replied simply. We needed that position neutralized, and I had the best angle for engagement. Harrison's voice came through their radios. All stations, mission complete. The Bravo boat is securing the weapons cargo. Exfiltration in 10 minutes. As they prepared to return to their boat, Webb clapped Kathleen on the shoulder. "Welcome back to Special Operations, Morrison. We missed having someone crazy enough to take chances like that." The boats rendezvoused in the middle of the river, their mission accomplished, but their understanding of Kathleen Morrison fundamentally changed. She wasn't just a medic with a special operations background, she was a warrior who had temporarily been forced into a support role. As they began their journey back to base, Harrison reflected on the night's events. Morrison had proven herself in combat, demonstrating not just medical competence, but tactical proficiency that exceeded many operators he'd worked with. More importantly, she had shown the kind of initiative and courage that defined the special operations community. The question now was what to do with an operator of her caliber who was officially classified as medical support personnel. That decision, however, would have to wait until they returned to base and filed their after-action reports. For now, it was enough that everyone had survived the mission and that Morrison had definitively proven she belonged with special operations teams. The debriefing room at Firebase Echo buzzed with controlled intensity as the intelligence officers processed the captured weapons cache. Dawn was breaking over the Afghan mountains, casting long shadows through the windows as SEAL Team 7 completed their after-action reports. The mission had been a tactical success, but its implications were far broader than anyone had initially realized. Major General Patricia Hawkins, the Regional Special Operations Commander, had flown in from Bagram specifically to review the intelligence hull. The weapons cache contained Russian-manufactured anti-aircraft missiles, advanced IED components, and communications equipment that suggested a much larger Taliban operation than previously suspected. The serial numbers on these SA-18 missiles trace back to weapons reported stolen from a Pakistani military depot 6 months ago, Colonel Davidson briefed the general. If there are more shipments like this moving through the region, we're looking at a significant escalation in enemy capabilities. Hawkins studied the intelligence reports with the focused attention of someone who understood the strategic implications. How many additional shipments are we talking about? Intelligence suggests at least 3 more convoys over the next 2 weeks, different routes, different timing, but similar cargo manifests. Interdiction requirements? Davidson glanced toward Harrison, who had been standing quietly at the back of the room. That's the tactical challenge, ma'am. These operations require specialized riverine capabilities that most units don't possess. What about conventional forces? Rangers have boat teams. Negative, ma'am, Harrison interjected. The river systems they're using are too complex for standard boat operations. You need personnel with advanced maritime training and experience operating in restricted waterways under combat conditions. Hawkins turned her attention to Harrison directly. Commander, your team handled last night's operation flawlessly, but my understanding is that you're scheduled to rotate back to Coronado next week. That's correct, ma'am. I need your team here for the follow-up operations. How do we make that work? Harrison had expected this conversation. The mission's success had created a tactical problem. There weren't many special operations units with the specific skill sets required for the upcoming interdiction missions. Ma'am, we can extend our deployment, but we'll need additional specialized personnel. Last night's operation pushed us to our operational limits. What kind of additional personnel? Primarily boat handling specialists. We need operators with advanced SWCC qualifications and combat diving capabilities. Davidson cleared his throat. General, we may have a solution to that problem already on base. Hawkins raised an eyebrow. Explain. Petty Officer Morrison, the medic who participated in last night's operation. Her background includes 8 years with special boat teams. Commander Harrison can provide a more detailed assessment of her capabilities. Harrison stepped forward, choosing his words carefully. Ma'am, Morrison demonstrated exceptional tactical proficiency during the mission. Her SWCC background proved invaluable for both boat operations and ground combat. A medic with special boat experience? Former SWCC operator, ma'am. medically reclassified after combat injuries, but her operational qualifications remain valid. Hawkins was quiet for several moments, processing this information. The military was filled with personnel whose careers had been derailed by administrative decisions that didn't reflect their actual capabilities. I want to interview Morrison personally. Set it up. An hour later, Kathleen found herself standing at attention in front of one of the most senior special operations commanders in Afghanistan. General Hawkins had a reputation for direct communication and little patience for bureaucratic obstacles. "At ease, Morrison. Have a seat." Kathleen settled into the offered chair, maintaining the alertness that characterizes special operations personnel even in administrative settings. "Tell me about your SWCC background." 8 years active duty with special boat teams, ma'am. 6 operational deployments, qualified on all current riverine platforms. Specialty areas included high-threat maritime operations and combat diving support. Why did you leave special boat teams? Medical reclassification after combat injuries sustained during Operation Iraqi Freedom. IED strike during a riverine mission resulted in shrapnel wounds that were deemed incompatible with special operations duty. Hawkins reviewed the medical file on her tablet. "But you remained in the Navy." "Yes, ma'am. Retrained as a combat medic, I wanted to continue serving in a capacity that would support special operations even if I couldn't operate directly with boat teams." Hawkins was quiet for several moments, processing this information. The military was filled with personnel whose careers had been derailed by administrative decisions that didn't reflect their actual capabilities. "I want to interview Morrison personally. Set it up." "Commander Harrison speaks very highly of your performance last night." "The team performed exceptionally, ma'am. I was honored to support their mission." Hawkins appreciated Morrison's understated response. Operators who bragged about their individual performance rarely possessed the team-focused mentality that made special operations successful. "Morrison, I'm going to be direct with you. We have additional riverine interdiction missions scheduled over the next 2 weeks. These operations require personnel with your specific background and qualifications. Are you interested in continuing to support SEAL Team 7 for these missions?" The opportunity Kathleen had been hoping for during 3 years of routine medical assignments was finally being offered, but she also understood the political complications that could arise from temporarily reassigning personnel outside their official specialties. "Ma'am, I would be honored to support these operations, but my current classification is medical support personnel. Any extended assignment with special operations teams would require command approval at multiple levels. Let me worry about the administrative details. What I need to know is whether you're operationally ready for sustained high-intensity riverine missions." Kathleen met the general's gaze directly. "Yes, ma'am. Absolutely." "Good. Report to Commander Harrison's team at 1400 hours. You're officially attached to SEAL Team 7 for the duration of these operations." After Morrison left, Hawkins turned to Davidson with the kind of expression that indicated wheels turning at the strategic level. "Colonel, how many other Morrisons do we have scattered throughout the system? Qualified special operations personnel stuck in support roles because of administrative classifications." Davidson had been wondering the same thing. "Unknown, ma'am. Personnel management systems don't track previous qualifications after medical reclassification. I want a comprehensive review. Identify every person in this theater who has a special operations background but is currently assigned to conventional support roles. We're probably wasting tremendous tactical assets because of bureaucratic inefficiency." The implications of this directive were significant. The military had spent millions of dollars training special operations personnel, only to reassign them to conventional roles when administrative obstacles arose. Finding and reintegrating these individuals could substantially enhance special operations capabilities. That afternoon, Kathleen reported to the SEAL Team compound with a different status than she'd held 24 hours earlier. No longer was she temporary medical support. She was now an integral member of Harrison's operational team. "Morrison," Torres greeted her as she entered the team room, "welcome to the permanent party. Hope you're ready for some intensive mission planning." The next 2 weeks would involve 3 separate interdiction operations, each targeting different Taliban weapons convoys moving through the region's river systems. The tactical challenges were substantial: varied terrain, different enemy force compositions, and intelligence that was often incomplete or outdated. First mission is tomorrow night, Harrison briefed the assembled team. Intelligence indicates a convoy of 4 boats moving down the Chitral River. Estimated cargo includes explosives, small arms, and possibly surface-to-air missiles. Webb studied the mission overlay on the tactical display. "Sir, Chitral has some challenging navigation. Shallow water, multiple rapids, limited maneuvering room. Which is why we need Morrison's expertise. She's our boat handling specialist for complex waterways." The designation carried weight that Kathleen hadn't experienced in 3 years. She was no longer supporting special operations, she was conducting special operations. The tactical approach will be different from last week's mission. We're looking at a coordinated assault involving underwater approaches and simultaneous boatborne attacks. Reyes looked up from his equipment checklist. Underwater approaches? Harrison nodded toward Kathleen. Morrison briefed the team on combat diving support options. For the next hour, Kathleen outlined tactical procedures she hadn't used since her SWAC days. Combat diving operations required precise coordination between surface and underwater elements, specialized equipment, and environmental conditions that could change rapidly. Water temperature in Chitral averages 42 degrees. Maximum safe dive time without thermal protection is approximately 12 minutes. We'll need dry suits for any extended underwater operations. Sullivan, who had performed well during the previous mission, raised a practical concern. "Do we have dive-qualified personnel for underwater approaches?" "Torres and I are both combat diver qualified. Morrison obviously has the credentials. That gives us 3 divers for underwater reconnaissance and assault support." The planning session continued into the evening, with each team member contributing expertise from their specialized backgrounds. But increasingly, the discussion centered around capabilities that Morrison brought to the team: boat handling in complex waterways, underwater operations, and tactical coordination between surface and subsurface elements. As the meeting concluded, Webb approached Kathleen with a question that had been bothering him since the previous mission. "Morrison, can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Do you miss it? SWAC life, I mean?" Kathleen considered the question carefully. "Every day. Special boat operations was everything I'd trained for, everything I wanted to do with my military career. When that got taken away, it felt like losing part of my identity. And now? Now I feel like I'm getting a second chance to do what I'm actually qualified for. It's not the same as being permanently assigned to a boat team, but it's close enough to remind me why I loved this work." Webb nodded understandingly. "You know, after watching you operate, I think this team is better with you as a permanent member than we were without you." The comment meant more to Kathleen than Webb probably realized. Acceptance by special operations teammates wasn't based on rank, credentials, or administrative classifications. It was earned through performance under pressure, and it represented validation that she still possessed the capabilities that had defined her military career. As she prepared her equipment for the next day's mission, Kathleen reflected on how dramatically her situation had changed in less than a week. She'd gone from routine medical support to integral special operations team member, from being underestimated to being relied upon for critical mission capabilities. But she also understood that this opportunity was temporary. When the current operations concluded, she would likely return to conventional medical assignments, unless something changed at the administrative level. For now, though, she was exactly where she belonged, preparing for high-risk special operations with teammates who understood her value. The next mission would be even more challenging than the previous one, but she was ready to prove once again that her capabilities extended far beyond what her official classification suggested. The question was whether the military bureaucracy would eventually recognize what operational commanders like Harrison and General Hawkins already understood: that artificial barriers between specialties often prevented the most qualified people from serving where they could be most effective. That answer would have to wait. Tomorrow night, there would be another weapons convoy to intercept, another opportunity to demonstrate that sometimes the most valuable team members were the ones whose potential had been overlooked by administrative systems that couldn't see past official job descriptions. The Chitral River moved like black silk through the mountain valley. its surface deceptively calm despite the treacherous currents beneath. At 0200 hours, three figures in dry suits slipped silently into the frigid water from a concealed position 2 kilometers upstream from the target area. The underwater reconnaissance phase of Operation Deep Strike had begun. Kathleen adjusted her diving mask and checked the luminous display of her diving computer. Water temperature, 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Visibility, less than 3 feet. Current speed, 2 knots. These were challenging conditions even for experienced combat divers, but they provided perfect concealment for their approach. Harrison's voice came through the underwater communication system, barely audible above the river's ambient noise. "Morrison, Torres, sound off." "Morrison, good copy," she responded. Her voice transmitted through bone conduction speakers that allowed communication without radio silence. "Torres, solid copy. Beginning descent to reconnaissance depth." The three divers descended to 15 feet below the surface, where the river's current was more predictable and they would be invisible to enemy observation. Their mission was to conduct close reconnaissance of the Taliban convoy's planned stopping point, identify defensive positions, and prepare underwater approach routes for the main assault team. Intelligence reports indicated that the enemy convoy would reach their target area at approximately 0300 hours, where they planned to transfer weapons cargo to ground vehicles for overland transport. The transfer site was a small beach area surrounded by rocky terrain that would provide excellent defensive positions. As they moved downstream, Kathleen felt the familiar sensation of operating in her natural element. Combat diving had been one of her primary specialties during her SWAC years, and the skills were returning with muscle memory precision. She maintained perfect buoyancy control while navigating by compass bearing, her movements synchronized with Harrison and Torres. After 20 minutes of underwater movement, they reached the reconnaissance area. Harrison signaled for them to surface carefully, using only their snorkels to minimize their profile above water. Through her night vision goggles, Kathleen could see the target beach clearly. A crescent-shaped shoreline approximately 50 meters wide, flanked by boulder fields that would provide concealment for enemy fighters. "Target area visual," Harrison whispered into his radio. "No enemy presence detected. Proceeding with detailed reconnaissance." They spent the next 30 minutes cataloging every tactical detail of the area. Depth soundings revealed that the water remained deep enough for boat operations until within 10 meters of shore. The rocky outcroppings provided numerous positions where enemy fighters could establish interlocking fields of fire. Most importantly, they identified an underwater approach route that would allow the assault team to reach the beach undetected. "Morrison," Harrison's voice came through the communication system, "I need you to check the southern approach. Look for obstacles or defensive positions we might have missed." Kathleen separated from the other two divers, swimming toward the southern end of the beach area. As she moved through the dark water, her training emphasized constant awareness of both tactical and environmental threats. The river's current was stronger near the shore, requiring careful navigation to maintain position. What she discovered changed everything about their planned assault. Hidden among the rocks at the water's edge were fighting positions that had been carefully camouflaged to be invisible from surface observation. Worse, she could see the distinctive signatures of heavy weapons, what appeared to be a recoilless rifle and multiple machine gun positions. "Harrison, Morrison," she transmitted urgently. "I've got prepared defensive positions on the southern approach. Heavy weapons, professional placement. This isn't a temporary stopping point, it's a permanent weapons transfer facility." The implications were immediate and significant. Instead of intercepting a convoy in transit, they had discovered a fixed Taliban logistics hub. The tactical situation was far more complex than their original intelligence had suggested. "Copy, Morrison. Return to formation. We need to reassess." As the three divers regrouped underwater, Harrison made the decision that would define the next phase of the operation. Change of mission. This is no longer a simple convoy interdiction. We're looking at a major enemy installation. Back at Firebase Echo, the Tactical Operations Center erupted into controlled activity as Harrison's revised intelligence assessment reached the command staff. General Hawkins, who had been monitoring the operation from Bagram, immediately authorized additional resources for what was now classified as a high-value target strike. "How many enemy personnel are we looking at?" Colonel Davidson asked Harrison over the secure radio link. "Estimate 20 to 30 fighters, well-positioned in prepared defensive sites. They've got heavy weapons and excellent fields of fire. This facility has been operating for weeks, possibly months." "And the weapons cache?" "Significantly larger than intelligence projected. We're seeing multiple storage areas, vehicle staging points, and what appears to be a command element." General Hawkins' voice cut through the radio chatter. "Commander Harrison, I'm authorizing immediate reinforcement. 2 additional SEAL teams are en route to your position, ETA 45 minutes. The decision transformed Operation Deep Strike from a small unit interdiction to a major special operations assault. But it also created a tactical problem: how to maintain surprise while coordinating a much larger force against a well-defended enemy position. General," Harrison said, "I recommend we proceed with the original 3-person reconnaissance team while the reinforcements position for the main assault. Morrison's underwater reconnaissance capabilities are critical for identifying the full scope of this facility." "Approved. But Harrison, this operation just became a priority target for every senior commander in theater. No unnecessary risks with your personnel." As the reinforcement teams moved toward their position, Kathleen found herself in an unexpected role. Her detailed knowledge of the underwater approaches made her the tactical expert for the most dangerous phase of the operation. "Morrison," Harrison called her aside as they prepared for the next reconnaissance phase, "I need you to guide the additional teams through the underwater approach routes. You're the only one who's mapped the area thoroughly." "Yes, sir. But the tactical situation has changed significantly. With enemy defensive positions covering the beach, we'll need alternative insertion points." "What do you recommend?" Kathleen had been mentally rehearsing this problem since discovering the hidden weapons positions. "There's a secondary beach area 400 meters north of the main facility. Water's deeper, fewer defensive positions, but it requires a longer underwater approach." "How much longer?" "Approximately 30 minutes submerged. That's pushing the limits of safe dive time in this water temperature, but it's tactically feasible." Harrison considered the options. The longer underwater approach would be physically demanding and potentially dangerous, but it offered the best chance of maintaining surprise against a well-prepared enemy. "Do it. You'll lead the underwater insertion for all 3 teams." The responsibility was both an honor and a burden. Kathleen would be navigating 18 special operations personnel through a complex underwater approach in challenging environmental conditions. Any navigation error could compromise the entire mission or potentially result in casualties from hypothermia or disorientation. As the reinforcement teams arrived, Kathleen briefed them on the underwater approach procedures. These were experienced special operations personnel, but few had conducted extended combat diving operations in mountainous river environments. "Water temperature is critical," she emphasized during the briefing. "We're looking at 30 minutes submerged in 40-degree water. Anyone who starts experiencing hypothermia symptoms needs to surface immediately. Don't try to tough it out. In these conditions, hypothermia can kill faster than enemy fire." Petty Officer First Class Ryan Murphy, team leader for one of the reinforcing SEAL teams, raised a practical concern. "Morrison, what's our contingency if the underwater approach gets compromised?" "Surface immediately and initiate emergency extraction procedures. But understand that if we're detected during the approach phase, the entire mission is blown. The enemy will have time to destroy the weapons cache and establish stronger defensive positions." At 031 hours, 18 divers entered the Chitral River at the designated insertion point. Kathleen led the formation, navigating by compass bearing and timing while maintaining perfect depth control. Behind her, the 3 SEAL teams moved in coordinated formations that she had choreographed based on the river's specific characteristics. The underwater movement was a masterpiece of precision navigation. Kathleen guided the formation through current variations, around underwater obstacles, and past potential detection points with the expertise that only came from years of specialized training. Her constant depth and direction adjustments kept the entire formation on course despite environmental conditions that would have challenged most combat divers. 25 minutes into the approach, they reached the alternative insertion beach. Kathleen surfaced carefully, confirmed that the area was clear of enemy presence, then guided the other 17 divers to shore with hand signals that maintained absolute silence. As the teams moved into assault positions, Kathleen realized that she had just completed one of the most technically demanding combat diving operations of her career. More importantly, she had successfully guided 18 special operations personnel through a mission-critical approach that would have been impossible without her specialized expertise. "Morrison," Harrison whispered as they prepared for the assault phase, "outstanding navigation. That approach saved this mission." But the assault itself was about to test every member of the combined teams. Intelligence estimates had proven conservative. The Taliban facility was larger, better defended, and more strategically important than anyone had imagined. Through her night vision goggles, Kathleen could see enemy sentries moving between defensive positions, heavy weapons crews manning their stations, and what appeared to be a significant command element coordinating facility operations. "All teams, stand by." Harrison's voice came through their communications system. "Assault commences in 60 seconds. As she checked her medical equipment one final time, Kathleen understood that the next phase of Operation Deep Strike would determine whether her return to Special Operations represented a temporary assignment or the beginning of a new chapter in her military career. The underwater approach had proven her navigational expertise, but the assault would test every aspect of her Special Operations training. The facility ahead represented a significant strategic target, but it also housed enough enemy fighters to make the next 30 minutes extremely dangerous for everyone involved. Success would require perfect coordination between 3 SEAL teams, precise timing, and the kind of individual initiative that defines special operations personnel. In 60 seconds, they would find out whether 18 months of planning and preparation would result in a decisive victory or a tactical disaster that could cost lives and compromise future operations in the region. The assault erupted at exactly 0347 hours, with synchronized explosions that lit up the Afghan night like deadly fireworks. 3 separate SEAL teams struck the Taliban weapons facility simultaneously, their coordinated attack designed to overwhelm enemy defensive positions before organized resistance could develop. Kathleen moved with Alpha Team as they advanced toward the facility's northern storage area, her medical equipment secured but accessible while she maintained combat readiness. The months of routine medical assignments had not dulled her tactical instincts. If anything, the enforced break had sharpened her appreciation for the complexity of special operations. The facility ahead represented a significant strategic target, but it also housed enough enemy fighters to make the next 30 minutes extremely dangerous for everyone involved. Success would require perfect coordination between 3 SEAL teams, precise timing, and the kind of individual initiative that defines special operations personnel. In 60 seconds, they would find out whether 18 months of planning and preparation would result in a decisive victory or a tactical disaster that could cost lives and compromise future operations in the region. "Storage building secured," Torres reported through the radio as his team cleared the first weapons cache. Multiple crates of explosives, small arms, and what appears to be communications equipment. But the Taliban defenders were not the disorganized fighters that intelligence had projected. Their return fire was disciplined and coordinated, suggesting professional military training rather than typical insurgent tactics. "Contact! Heavy weapons position!" Murphy's voice crackled through the communication system as his team encountered the recoilless rifle that Kathleen had identified during reconnaissance. "We need immediate suppression on grid reference 41SMD1234567890. Harrison coordinated the response while maintaining his team's advance toward the command element. "Bravo team, shift fire to support Charlie team's assault. Morrison, casualties incoming to your position." The first wounded arrived within minutes. Petty Officer Jackson from Murphy's team hit by shrapnel from the recoilless rifle's near miss. Kathleen immediately began trauma assessment while maintaining tactical awareness of the ongoing firefight around them. "Penetrating fragment wound to the upper chest," she reported while applying pressure dressings. "Breathing is compromised but stable. I need immediate evacuation to surgical facilities." "Negative on immediate evacuation," Harrison replied. The landing zone is not secure. Can you stabilize it for transport? Affirmative, establishing chest seal and airway management. Working under fire had become routine during her SWC years, but the medical complexity added layers of challenge that demanded absolute focus. Jackson's wound required advanced trauma procedures that were difficult enough in controlled hospital environments, much less while automatic weapons fire echoed through the mountains around them. "Morrison," Jackson gasped as she worked on his chest wound, "how bad is it?" "You're going to be fine," she replied with the confident authority that seriously wounded personnel needed to hear. "Stay conscious and keep talking to me. Tell me about your family." As Jackson described his wife and 2 young children, Kathleen continued her medical intervention while monitoring the tactical situation through her radio. The assault was succeeding, but slowly, and additional casualties were inevitable. "Alpha Team, command elements secured," Webb reported from the facility's central area. "Multiple enemy personnel captured, intelligence materials recovered." "Outstanding," Harrison responded. "Bravo Team, status on heavy weapons positions." 2 positions neutralized, 1 still active on the southern perimeter. The remaining heavy weapons position was the recoilless rifle that had wounded Jackson. Its crew had excellent cover among the rocks and was systematically engaging each SEAL team as they attempted to advance. The weapon's high explosive shells made it impossible for the Americans to concentrate their forces for a final assault. "I can reach that position," Kathleen said into her radio, her voice cutting through the tactical chatter. "Negative, Morrison," Harrison replied immediately. "You're treating casualties. Jackson is stabilized and ready for evacuation. That recoilless rifle is preventing consolidation of the objective area." Torres's voice joined the conversation. "Morrison, your medical support. Let the assault teams handle tactical problems." But Kathleen was already studying the terrain between her position and the enemy weapon. Her SWC training had emphasized individual initiative and aggressive tactics, skills that applied directly to the current tactical situation. "Chief, that position has perfect fields of fire on our current locations. They can keep us pinned down indefinitely while reinforcements arrive. Someone needs to get close enough for a grenade assault." Harrison understood the tactical reality. The heavy weapons position was tactically superior to anything the SEAL teams could establish from their current positions. But sending Morrison, their only medical asset, on a direct assault was an enormous risk. "What's your approach plan?" "Dead space in the rocks provides concealment to within grenade range. I can reach the position without exposure to their direct fire." "Morrison," Harrison said, his voice carrying the weight of command decision, "you are not expendable. We have other options." "Sir, with respect, those other options will result in additional casualties that I'll have to treat. This is the most efficient tactical solution." Before anyone could object further, enemy reinforcements announced their arrival with a barrage of mortar fire that began impacting around the SEAL positions. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly, and decisive action was required. "All teams, enemy reinforcements approaching from the east," Murphy reported. "Estimate squad-sized element with heavy weapons support." The arrival of additional Taliban fighters transformed the mission from a successful assault to a potentially catastrophic situation. The SEAL teams were outnumbered, low on ammunition, and faced with the prospect of fighting a withdrawal while carrying wounded personnel. Kathleen made the decision that would define not only the mission's outcome, but her own future in special operations. Without requesting permission, she began moving toward the enemy recoilless rifle position, using the terrain features she had memorized during her underwater reconnaissance. "Morrison, return to position immediately," Harrison ordered. "Sir, Jackson needs immediate evacuation, and that won't happen until we eliminate that heavy weapons position." Her movement through the rocks demonstrated every aspect of her special operations training. She used cover and concealment expertly, timing her advances to coincide with friendly suppressive fire while maintaining perfect noise discipline. The Taliban crew manning the recoilless rifle was focused on engaging the main SEAL positions and didn't detect her approach. At 20 meters range, she prepared 2 fragmentation grenades, calculating the precise timing and trajectory needed to neutralize the enemy position. The throw had to be perfect. Too short, and the enemy crew would have time to engage her. Too long, and they could escape the blast radius. "Morrison, in position for final assault," she reported quietly. "Stand by for supporting fire," Harrison replied, recognizing that her assault represented their best tactical option. The grenades left her hands in a smooth sequence, their trajectory calculated to explode simultaneously in the enemy position. The dual detonation eliminated the recoilless rifle crew and destroyed the weapon that had been dominating the battlefield. "The heavy weapons position was neutralized," she reported calmly. The elimination of the Taliban recoilless rifle broke their defensive coordination, allowing the three SEAL teams to consolidate their positions and prepare for evacuation. More importantly, it enabled the medical evacuation helicopter to reach Jackson and two other wounded personnel before their injuries became life-threatening. As the teams prepared to extract from the objective area, Harrison approached Kathleen with an expression that mixed professional respect with personal concern. "Morrison, that was either the most tactically sound decision I've seen in 20 years or a complete violation of medical personnel protocols." "It was the right tactical decision, sir. Jackson would have died if we'd remained pinned down by that heavy weapons position." "Agreed, but you understand the implications of what just happened?" Kathleen nodded. Medical personnel who engaged in direct combat faced potential administrative consequences, regardless of tactical necessity. Her actions had saved lives and enabled mission success, but they had also blurred the lines between medical support and combat operations. "Sir, I've spent 3 years trying to serve where I could be most effective." Tonight demonstrated that artificial barriers between specialties sometimes prevent the best tactical outcomes. 6 weeks later, Kathleen found herself in an office at the Pentagon, facing a review board that would determine her military future. The success of Operation Deep Strike had generated attention at the highest levels of the special operations community, but it had also raised questions about personnel classification systems. General Hawkins served as the board's senior member, flanked by representatives from Naval Special Warfare Command, Special Operations Command, and the Navy's Personnel Management Office. "Petty Officer Morrison," General Hawkins began, "your actions during recent operations in Afghanistan have been the subject of considerable discussion at multiple command levels." "Yes, ma'am." "The question before this board is not whether your actions were tactically effective. They clearly were. The question is how the Navy should classify personnel with your unique combinations." The implications extended far beyond Kathleen's individual case. The military had hundreds of personnel whose careers had been limited by administrative classifications that didn't reflect their actual capabilities. General Hawkins served as the board's senior member, flanked by representatives from Naval Special Warfare Command, Special Operations Command, and the Navy's Personnel Management Office. "Petty Officer Morrison," General Hawkins began, "your actions during recent operations in Afghanistan have been the subject of considerable discussion at multiple command levels." "Yes, ma'am." "The question before this board is not whether your actions were tactically effective. They clearly were. The question is how the Navy should classify personnel with your unique combinations." The implications extended far beyond Kathleen's individual case. The military had hundreds of personnel whose careers had been limited by administrative classifications that didn't reflect their actual capabilities. Morrison, the Naval Special Warfare representative, continued, "We're prepared to offer you several options. You can return to conventional medical duties, retrain for permanent assignment to Special Operations medical units, or participate in a pilot program that we're developing." "What kind of pilot program, sir?" General Hawkins leaned forward. "A new specialty classification, Special Operations Medical Tactical Specialist. Personnel who combine advanced medical training with special operations qualifications, specifically trained to operate with special forces units in high-threat environments." The position represented everything Kathleen had hoped for during 3 years of underutilization: medical responsibilities with special operations teams, tactical authority commensurate with her qualifications, and permanent assignment to the units where she could be most effective. "The program is experimental," Hawkins continued. "You would be among the first personnel selected, which means developing procedures that don't currently exist." "I understand, ma'am." Morrison, this decision will affect not just your career, but potentially the careers of hundreds of other personnel who have been limited by current classification systems. Are you prepared for that responsibility? Kathleen thought about Jackson, who had returned to full duty after his injuries. She thought about the SEAL teams who had accepted her as an equal based on performance rather than administrative classifications. Most importantly, she thought about the potential to serve where her unique combination of skills could save lives and enable mission success. Yes, ma'am, I'm ready. 2 months later, Chief Petty Officer Kathleen Morrison reported to the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California, as the senior instructor for the new Special Operations Medical Tactical Specialist program. Her students would include former medics with special operations backgrounds, special operations personnel seeking advanced medical training, and carefully selected individuals who demonstrated the potential to excel in both specialties. The program represented a fundamental shift in how the military approached personnel utilization, recognizing that artificial barriers between specialties often prevented optimal operational effectiveness. Morrison's journey from underestimated support medic to pioneering instructor had taken 4 years, but it had changed not just her own career trajectory, but the opportunities available to countless other service members. On her first day as an instructor, she stood before a class of 24 students who represented the future of integrated special operations medicine. They were diverse in background, but united by the common thread of having been underutilized by systems that couldn't see past traditional job classifications. Your previous experience brought you here, she told them, but your performance in this program will determine whether you earn the right to serve with special operations teams. The standards are higher than anything you've encountered, and the expectations are absolute. She paused, looking at each student individually. But if you succeed, you'll have the opportunity to serve where your unique qualifications can make the difference between mission success and mission failure, between lives saved and lives lost. As the first class of Special Operations Medical Tactical Specialists began their training, Kathleen reflected on the path that had brought her from a misunderstood support medic to a pioneer in military personnel development. The combat diver pen on her uniform no longer represented a qualification from her past. It symbolized the integration of all her skills in service of something larger than any individual specialty. The program she now led would train personnel who could navigate underwater approaches, conduct advanced trauma surgery, coordinate tactical assaults, and save lives under fire. They would be living proof that the most effective military personnel were often those whose capabilities transcended traditional boundaries. Most importantly, they would ensure that no qualified individual would ever again be limited by administrative systems that failed to recognize the full scope of their potential contributions. The revolution in military thinking that began with one overlooked medic had become a fundamental change in how special operations approached personnel development. And it all started with someone who refused to accept that her past disqualified her from contributing to the future. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.